Susan Smith. On October 25, 1994, Susan Smith strapped her two sons into her car and rolled it into John D. Long Lake, ending their lives in the cold water below. The 23-year-old South Carolina mother then fabricated a story about a carjacking by a stranger, pleading on national television for 9 days while investigators searched for her missing boys. What drove this young mother to such an unthinkable act? The events leading to that fatal night painted a picture of a life marked by significant challenges. Susan had endured her father's passing at age 6, faced inappropriate treatment from her stepfather, and attempted to end her own life at 13. Married to David Smith in 1991. Their relationship deteriorated amid infidelity, and she became involved with Tom Finley, a man who ended their relationship partly because he did not want to raise her sons. The rejection hit her particularly hard, as she had hoped this relationship would provide an escape from her troubled marriage. On that October evening, Susan drove to the lake with her sons secured in their car seats. She released the parking brake and watched as the vehicle disappeared beneath the surface approximately 122 feet from shore. She then drove to a nearby home and reported a carjacking, claiming a stranger had taken her car with her boys inside. Her televised pleas captured national attention, with many sympathizing with what appeared to be a distraught mother. For over a week, search parties combed the area looking for the boys, while Susan continued to maintain her fabricated story about the stranger who had taken them. How did authorities uncover the deception? Investigators noticed inconsistencies in Susan's account, including details about traffic signals that didn't match reality. She failed multiple examinations, and after 9 days of intense questioning, she confessed on November 3rd. Divers recovered the vehicle with both boys still strapped inside. The confession shocked the nation, as many had believed her story and sympathized with her apparent grief. During her 1995 trial, the defense team presented evidence of her difficult background, with her attorney stating this was not a case about malice, but about despair. Experts testified about her dependent personality tendencies and significant emotional struggles. The prosecution sought the maximum penalty, arguing she had deliberately taken her sons' lives to pursue a relationship without the burden of motherhood. After 2.5 hours of deliberation, the jury chose life imprisonment with the possibility of consideration after 30 years. The decision spared her from execution, with jurors citing her troubled past as a mitigating factor. Susan was sentenced to concurrent life terms and has been held at Leith Correctional Institution since 2000. In November 2024, she faced her first consideration for possible release. Her former husband David attended the proceeding and opposed her release, stating her actions were deliberate and not a mistake. Susan expressed remorse, saying she knows what she did was wrong and that she believes she has been forgiven spiritually. The board denied her request, and she will have another opportunity in 2026. During her incarceration, she has faced disciplinary issues, but has also participated in various programs. The next case would involve questions that remain unanswered decades later. Darlie Routier. On June 6, 1996, 2 young boys were found with fatal wounds in their Rolette, Texas home, and their mother Darlie claimed an intruder had attacked her family. The 26-year-old reported that a stranger had entered through a cut screen in the garage, harmed her sons, and wounded her before fleeing. Her husband Darren and infant son Drake were upstairs asleep during the incident. But did an intruder really enter the Routier home that night? The investigation quickly revealed concerning inconsistencies at the scene. There was no trail in the garage, and dust on the windowsill remained undisturbed. Forensic experts found patterns on Darlie's nightshirt that suggested close contact during the incident. A sock with material was discovered 75 yards from the home, which raised questions about the timeline she provided. Investigators also noted that the alleged point of entry showed no signs of forced access, and the cut screen appeared to have been made from the inside rather than the outside. Prosecutors theorized that financial pressures played a role, pointing to life insurance policies worth $10,000 for each son. The defense argued this amount was insufficient as a motive and highlighted an unidentified fingerprint found at the scene. Darley was arrested on June 18, 1996. The arrest came after investigators determined that the evidence did not support her version of events, and they believed she had staged the scene to appear as though an intruder had been responsible. What evidence sealed her fate? During the 1997 trial, prosecutors presented footage recorded at a memorial service that showed Darley in a manner they characterized as inappropriate for a grieving mother. The video showed her at the gravesite in what prosecutors described as inconsistent with expected behavior. Her testimony during questioning was problematic, and the prosecution characterized her as someone capable of such actions. The footage became a controversial piece of evidence, with some viewing it as proof of guilt, while others argued it showed a grieving mother trying to celebrate her son's birthday. On February 4, 1997, Darley was found guilty and received a sentence placing her on death row. She has been held at the Patrick O'Daniel Unit in Gatesville, Texas, where she continues to maintain her innocence. Throughout her time in prison, she has consistently denied any involvement in the events that took her sons' lives. Her case has generated ongoing debate, with supporters pointing to the unidentified fingerprint and the sock found far from the home as potential evidence supporting her claims. Her former husband Darren has publicly stated his belief in her innocence. Appeals have been filed requesting testing on the fingerprint and other evidence, though as of 2025, she remains on death row awaiting resolution of these requests. In a 2006 interview, Darley spoke about the memorial service footage, explaining she was trying to honor her son. Her supporters continue to advocate for additional forensic testing that they believe could prove her innocence. The following case shocked Florida with its sudden brutality. Julie Schenecker. On January 27, 2011, police in Tampa, Florida, made a disturbing discovery after a welfare check. Julie Schenecker, a 50-year-old military wife, was found unconscious at her home alongside the remains of her 2 teenage children. She had used a weapon purchased just days earlier. What circumstances led to this family's destruction? Julie had reportedly become increasingly frustrated with her teenagers' behavior, later describing them as difficult to manage. On that January day, she first harmed her son as he returned from soccer practice while he sat in their vehicle. She then went inside the home and harmed her daughter in her bedroom. She covered both children with blankets, and investigators later found a note at the scene. The note provided some insight into her state of mind at the time, though its contents shocked those who read it. Julie's mother had requested the welfare check when she couldn't reach the family. This was not the first time authorities had been involved with the household, as there had been a previous report regarding family concerns. Upon arrival, officers discovered Julie and immediately took her into custody. She confessed to the actions, but stated she didn't understand why she had done it. Her confusion about her own motivations would become a central issue in her trial. How did the trial address her mental state? Julie's defense team presented extensive evidence regarding her mental health struggles. They argued she was experiencing a psychiatric crisis and should not be held fully responsible. Medical records showed she had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and testimony from family members described how her condition had deteriorated over time. Witnesses testified that she had been taking multiple prescriptions and had seemed increasingly disconnected from reality in the weeks leading up to the incident. The prosecution countered that, despite her mental health issues, Julie knew what she was doing when she purchased the weapon and carried out her actions. They pointed to the deliberate nature of her preparations and the fact that she had written a note beforehand. In May 2014, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before reaching a guilty verdict. The judge sentenced her to life imprisonment without the possibility of release. Julie's former husband, Parker, expressed relief at the verdict. She remains incarcerated in Florida as of 2025, with a recent appeal having been denied. In jailhouse conversations, she has expressed remorse for her actions. She spends her days in a facility where she continues to receive treatment for her mental health conditions. But the next case would involve a mother who turned herself in with evidence of her actions. Amber Pastor. In September 2016, authorities in Indiana faced a heartbreaking case when Amber Pastor drove to a police station and surrendered. The 29-year-old mother had taken her 2 children and ended their lives by taking away their ability to breathe. She had also harmed a neighbor who had tried to help during her custody situation. What led this troubled mother down such a devastating path? Amber's background revealed a pattern of instability and mental health struggles. She had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder at age 16 and had experienced significant difficulties throughout her adult life. Records showed involvement with social services dating back to 2011, with reports of concerning situations and periods when she could not be located. In addition to bipolar disorder, she was experiencing paranoid thoughts and had been using substances to self-medicate. Her life had been marked by a series of difficult relationships and unstable living situations that contributed to her deteriorating mental state. In September 2016, Amber took her children after a custody dispute. She later told investigators she believed she needed to protect them from perceived threats, though these fears had no basis in reality. After ending her children's lives, she drove to Fort Wayne and surrendered with their remains in her vehicle. The drive to the police station took several hours, during which she apparently grappled with what she had done. How did prosecutors approach this complicated case? Before taking her children, Amber had harmed 66-year-old Frank McCumber, a neighbor who had previously helped her with transportation during her custody proceedings. Investigators found evidence suggesting she had been planning these actions for some time. In jailhouse statements, Amber claimed she was trying to save her children, revealing the depth of her psychological issues. Her delusional beliefs about threats to her children showed how disconnected she had become from reality. Despite her documented mental health problems, psychiatric evaluations determined she understood the nature of her actions and could participate in legal proceedings. The evaluations found that while she suffered from serious conditions, she still possessed the capacity to understand right from wrong and to assist in her own defense. In June 2017, Amber entered a plea acknowledging guilt but citing mental illness. For her actions involving her children, she received 130 years. In 2018, she was sentenced to an additional 65 years for Frank McCumber's death, bringing her total to 195 years. Amber remains incarcerated in Indiana as of 2025, with no possibility of release during her lifetime. In court, she expressed remorse for her actions, though her words provided little comfort to those who had lost loved ones. She continues to receive treatment for her mental health conditions while serving her sentence. While this was one kind of heartbreak, the next case involved a custody situation that ended in unspeakable loss. Deborah Jeter. On May 5, 2009, Deborah Jeter met her two daughters for what should have been a routine visitation in Texas. Instead, the 31-year-old mother drove them to an abandoned house and attacked both children with a blade, leaving one to succumb to injuries while the other miraculously survived despite critical wounds. What drove a mother to harm her own children during a custody visit? Deborah's marriage to Lee Jeter had recently ended, and the separation had devastated her emotionally. Friends and family described her as struggling significantly with the divorce, and she had even attempted to end her own life in front of her daughters just weeks before. Medical records revealed she had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, but she was not receiving proper treatment at the time. The dissolution of her marriage had left her feeling hopeless and desperate, unable to see any path forward for herself or her children. On that spring afternoon, Deborah picked up her daughters as scheduled. Instead of spending time with them as planned, she drove to a vacant property. In what she later described as an attempt to take away all their pain, Deborah attacked both girls. She then called emergency services herself, making the chilling statement that she had just ended her children's lives. On the recording, she could be heard telling one daughter to hold on, showing some awareness of the horror she had just perpetrated. How did the surviving daughter make it through such an ordeal? First responders arrived to find both girls with severe throat wounds. The blade used in the attack was found on top of Deborah's vehicle. The younger daughter had succumbed to her injuries, but the older daughter, though critically harmed, was still conscious and able to provide information to police. She was immediately transported for emergency treatment and underwent extensive procedures to save her life. Medical teams worked for hours to stabilize her condition and repair the damage, and her survival was considered remarkable given the severity of her injuries. Deborah was arrested at the scene and initially placed under monitoring due to concerns about her mental state. She remained largely silent following her detention, offering little explanation beyond what she had said during the emergency call. Her attorney later spoke about her remorse and mental health struggles, attempting to provide some context for her actions. In June 2010, Deborah entered a guilty plea to avoid putting her surviving daughter through the ordeal of testifying. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without any possibility of release. The sheriff who worked the case described it as one of the most difficult situations he had ever encountered. Deborah remains incarcerated in Texas as of 2025. Her surviving daughter has reportedly recovered physically and is living with her father, though the emotional wounds from that day will likely never fully heal. The next case would reveal how greed and betrayal can destroy a family from within. Monica Sementilli. In January 2017, Fabio Sementilli, a prominent Los Angeles hairstylist, was found deceased on the patio of his Woodland Hills home. He had been attacked with a blade repeatedly, and the scene initially appeared to suggest a random act. However, investigators would soon uncover a conspiracy orchestrated by his wife, Monica Sementilli, and her lover. What led a wife of 25 years to plan her husband's end? Monica, then 48 years old, had been carrying on a relationship with Robert Baker, her personal trainer. The two had developed feelings for each other, and Monica allegedly wanted to collect on Fabio's $1.6 million life insurance policy. Rather than pursue a divorce, which would have divided assets, prosecutors said Monica chose a more permanent solution. The relationship between Monica and Baker had been ongoing for some time, and they had discussed their future together, which did not include Fabio. On the night of the incident, Monica reportedly left a door unlocked at the family home. Baker arrived and attacked Fabio on the back patio while Monica was allegedly inside the home. The attack was brutal, with Fabio suffering more than 30 wounds. Baker then fled the scene in Fabio's Porsche, which was later recovered. The brutality of the attack suggested both rage and determination to ensure Fabio would not survive. How did investigators piece together this conspiracy? Both Monica and Baker were arrested shortly after the incident in 2017. During the investigation, a third individual came forward and testified that he had been approached by Baker to participate in the plan, but had refused. This testimony proved crucial in establishing premeditation and Monica's involvement. The witness provided detailed information about conversations and planning that had taken place in the months before Fabio was taken from his family. Phone records and surveillance footage supported the prosecution's timeline of events. Despite the evidence, Baker maintained after his own conviction that Monica had not been involved, suggesting he had acted alone. However, prosecutors successfully argued that the conspiracy was clear and that Monica had been the mastermind. The evidence overwhelmingly showed that she had orchestrated every aspect of the plan. Monica's trial took place in April 2025, and she was found guilty of conspiracy and other charges. In June 2025, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release. Fabio's sister spoke at the sentencing, expressing the profound betrayal felt by the family. Monica is currently incarcerated in California. Baker had previously been sentenced to life without the possibility of release for his role in carrying out the attack. Both will spend the remainder of their lives behind bars for their roles in ending Fabio Cementilli's life. If you've made it this far and enjoy deep dive into the most shocking criminal cases, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon. But the next case would involve beliefs that led to unthinkable losses. Lori Vallow Daybell. In September 2019, 2 children disappeared from their home in Idaho, sparking a nationwide search that would eventually expose one of the most disturbing cases in recent memory. Lori Vallow Daybell, a mother who had become deeply involved in fringe religious beliefs, was at the center of a conspiracy that would claim multiple lives. The children, along with other individuals connected to the family, would all meet tragic ends as Lori pursued what she believed was a divine mission. What twisted ideology drove a mother to such devastating actions? Lori had been raised in a religious family, but gradually became immersed in extreme interpretations involving end-times prophecies and spiritual rankings. She met Chad Daybell, an author who shared similar beliefs, and together they developed a worldview in which certain people were deemed dark spirits or obstacles to their perceived mission. Lori allegedly began labeling individuals, including her own children, with designations that justified their removal from her life. Financial motivations also appeared to play a role, as life insurance policies and survivor benefits would provide substantial funds. The children were last seen in September 2019, but Lori did not report them missing. When relatives and authorities began asking questions, she provided various explanations about their whereabouts, claiming they were staying with friends or family members. In reality, the children had been taken from their family, and their remains would later be discovered buried on Chad Daybell's property in Idaho. One had been suffocated, while the other had suffered even more extensive harm. The discoveries shocked investigators and the community. How did investigators unravel this complex conspiracy? The investigation revealed a pattern of suspicious incidents involving people close to Lori and Chad. Chad's previous wife had passed away unexpectedly just weeks before he married Lori, with circumstances that later prompted investigators to exhume her remains. Lori's former husband had also met a fatal end in what was initially considered self-defense by Lori's brother, who himself passed away shortly thereafter. The web of incidents surrounding the couple raised serious questions. Technology and digital evidence played crucial roles in the investigation. Phone records showed the movements and communications of those involved, while surveillance footage captured key moments. When the children's remains were found in June 2020, both Lori and Chad were arrested. The forensic evidence from the burial sites provided investigators with detailed information about what had happened to the children. During her Idaho trial in 2023, prosecutors presented extensive evidence of Lori's beliefs and actions. Witnesses testified about the couple's ideology and the concerning statements Lori had made about her children. The jury found her guilty, and she received multiple life sentences without the possibility of release. Even after her conviction, Lori maintained that no wrongdoing had occurred, claiming spiritual justification for events. Additional proceedings took place in Arizona related to other incidents involving Lori's previous husband and an attempt on another individual's life. In April 2025, she was found guilty of conspiracy in these matters, and in July 2025, she received additional consecutive life sentences. Before her Arizona sentencing, Lori spoke in court about finding her children and continued to deny responsibility. Lori is currently held at the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center in Idaho, where she will spend the rest of her life. Appeals have been filed challenging her convictions, though legal experts consider her chances of success minimal, given the overwhelming evidence presented at trial. The following case involved a different kind of tragedy. Kara Alexander. On November 15, 2022, a father returned home in London to discover an unthinkable scene. Kara Alexander, a 47-year-old mother, had taken the lives of her two young sons in their bathtub. The case would reveal how a previously caring mother had experienced a complete break from reality. What caused such a devastating loss of awareness? Those who knew Kara described her as an affectionate and devoted mother before the incident. There had been no prior indications of danger to her children, and she had no history of harming them. However, in the period leading up to that November day, Kara had been regularly using a particularly potent form of a substance that can induce severe psychological reactions. Medical experts would later determine that her nightly consumption of this substance had triggered a psychotic episode. On that autumn evening, Kara was alone with her sons when she lost touch with reality. She filled the bathtub and held both children under the water until they could no longer breathe. When their father arrived home, he discovered the heartbreaking scene and immediately called for help. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but it was too late to save the children. Post-mortem examinations confirmed that both boys had drowned. How did medical experts explain what happened? Psychiatric evaluations revealed that Kara had been experiencing a substance-induced psychotic state at the time. The particular type of substance she had been using is known to cause severe psychological reactions in some individuals, including complete disconnection from reality. Experts testified that during the episode, Kara would not have been aware of what she was doing or understood the consequences of her actions. The psychosis had stripped away her normal maternal instincts and judgment. The legal proceedings addressed whether Kara bore responsibility given her mental state. While her actions during the psychotic episode were not deliberate in the traditional sense, the court considered that her voluntary substance use had created the conditions that led to the tragedy. In February 2025, a jury found her guilty of taking her sons' lives. During the sentencing hearing in April 2025, the judge acknowledged the complexity of the case. The judge described the events as the stuff of nightmares, recognizing both the horror of what happened and the unusual circumstances. Kara received a life sentence with a minimum term of 21 years before she could be considered for possible release. The sentence reflected both the gravity of the loss and the recognition that her mental state had been severely impaired. The father of the boys provided a statement expressing his profound grief and the impossibility of comprehending what had happened to his family. Kara remains incarcerated in the United Kingdom as of 2025, where she continues to come to terms with what occurred during her psychotic episode. The case has prompted discussions about substance-induced reactions and their potential dangers. While this involved loss of awareness, the next case showed deliberate intent. Shilirand Charagwadi. In February 2024, emergency services in Hemel Hempstead, England, received a disturbing call from Shilirand Charagwadi. The 30-year-old nurse from Zimbabwe had just taken the life of her young daughter. When authorities arrived at the scene, they discovered the child had been suffocated. The case would expose how a custody dispute and mental health struggles had culminated in an act of revenge. What drove a healthcare professional to such a devastating act? Shilirand had been working as a nurse in the United Kingdom, but her personal life had become increasingly troubled. She had recently lost custody of her daughter following legal proceedings, which had devastated her. According to investigators and court testimony, she had been struggling with feelings of anger toward her former partner and depression about losing custody. Rather than seeking help for her emotional turmoil, Shilirand began contemplating a way to hurt her former partner in the most profound way possible. On that winter day in February, Shilirand was with her daughter when she made the decision to act on her vengeful thoughts. She placed a bag over the child's head, taking away her ability to breathe. After committing the act, she contacted emergency services herself. During that call, she claimed she was experiencing mental health difficulties, attempting to establish a defense for what she had done. How did investigators establish her true motivation? The investigation revealed evidence that contradicted Shilirand's claims of being unaware of her actions. Prosecutors presented testimony and evidence showing that her actions were driven by a desire for revenge against her former partner. The custody loss had occurred before the incident, and witnesses testified about Shilirand's increasing bitterness and anger. Her communications and behavior in the period before the incident suggested calculated intent rather than a spontaneous loss of control. While Shilirand claimed mental health issues had impaired her judgment, psychiatric evaluations determined that while she was experiencing emotional distress, she understood the nature and consequences of her actions. The experts found that her depression, while genuine, did not rob her of the capacity to make choices or understand right from wrong. In April 2025, a jury found her guilty of taking her daughter's life. During her sentencing, the court heard victim impact statements from family members devastated by the loss. The child's father spoke about the profound pain of losing his daughter in such a manner. The judge sentenced Shilirand to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years before she could be considered for possible release. The judge noted that while mental health factors were present, the vengeful motivation was clear. Shilirand remains incarcerated in the United Kingdom as of 2025, where she will serve her sentence. Next case would involve a mystery that remains unsolved decades later. Kelly Lane. In September 1996, Kelly Lane gave birth to a baby girl in a Sydney hospital. 2 days later, she left the hospital with the infant, and the child was never seen again. The case would not come to light for over a decade, and to this day, no trace of the baby has ever been found. How did a promising athlete hide multiple pregnancies? Kelly Lane was born in 1975 to a hospital worker and a police officer. She became an elite water polo player, competing at high levels throughout her youth and young adulthood. However, investigators would later discover that Kaylee had concealed multiple pregnancies during her athletic career, giving birth to several children that her friends, family, and teammates knew nothing about. Some of these children were placed for adoption, but others simply disappeared from record. The case began unraveling in 2003 when investigators started looking into inconsistencies in adoption records and birth registrations. They discovered that Kaylee had given birth to a child in 1996, but had provided no information about what happened to the baby. Kelly claimed she had given the child to the biological father, a man she said was named Andrew Morris or Andrew Norris. But investigators could never locate any person matching that description. No records, no witnesses, and no evidence supported her story about this man. What motivated her to conceal her pregnancies? Psychological evaluations found that Kaylee did not suffer from any mental disorder that would explain her actions. Instead, experts testified that she appeared to make calculated decisions based on protecting her image and athletic career. She had worked hard to build her reputation as an elite athlete, and pregnancies threatened that carefully constructed identity. The concealment required elaborate deceptions and planning. Because no remains were ever found, the case against Kaylee relied entirely on circumstantial evidence. Prosecutors argued that she had taken her daughter's life shortly after leaving the hospital, while Kaylee maintained she had given the baby to the father. Phone records showed Kaylee had called her mother on the day she left the hospital, reportedly saying she had no choice about what she had to do. In 2010, after a lengthy trial, Kaylee was found guilty and sentenced to 18 years in prison. She has maintained her innocence throughout her incarceration, insisting the baby is alive somewhere. In March 2024, Kaylee was denied release under a law that prevents individuals convicted in cases where no remains have been found from receiving consideration until they provide information about the location. During her time in prison, allegations surfaced that she had been subjected to inappropriate treatment by a corrections officer, leading to legal proceedings and her testimony before Parliament. Kaylee remains incarcerated at Silverwater Women's Correctional Center, where she continues to deny any wrongdoing. The following case involved a stepmother whose actions shocked a community. Letitia Stauch. On January 27, 2020, a young boy disappeared from his Colorado home. His stepmother, Letitia Stauch, reported that he had left to visit a friend and never returned. The search for him would captivate the nation, but the truth was far more sinister than anyone initially imagined. What had really happened to the missing boy? Letitia had married the boy's father and become his stepmother, but the relationship between them had reportedly been strained. Testimony and evidence would later suggest she harbored feelings of resentment toward the child. On that January day, while his father was away, Letitia attacked the boy in their home using multiple methods, including a blade, blunt force, and eventually a weapon. The brutality of the attack suggested intense anger and a determination to ensure he would not survive. After taking his life, Letitia placed his body in a suitcase. She then began an elaborate cover-up, reporting him missing and participating in searches while knowing exactly what had happened. She transported his remains across state lines to Florida, where she disposed of the suitcase. The suitcase was eventually discovered weeks later, providing investigators with the evidence they needed to piece together what had occurred. How did investigators uncover her deception? From the beginning, investigators found inconsistencies in Letitia's account of events. Her story changed multiple times as she attempted to explain what had happened. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera showed Letitia leaving the house with the boy, but returning alone. with what appeared to be different items in her vehicle. Phone records and digital forensics placed her in locations that contradicted her statements. During interviews with detectives, Letitia provided various explanations, at one point claiming the incident had been accidental. She even conducted a video call with the detective, questioning him about male officers who had been at her home. Her behavior throughout the investigation raised additional suspicions. Letitia was arrested in March 2020 in South Carolina. During her 2023 trial, she claimed to suffer from dissociative identity disorder and blamed an alternate personality for the actions. Psychological experts testified that she did not actually have this condition and that she was feigning symptoms. They found she had personality traits, including borderline and narcissistic characteristics. But she was legally sane and understood her actions. What was the outcome of her trial? The jury found Letitia guilty of first-degree proceedings in May 2023. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release, plus an additional 156 years for other charges. The judge described the case as one of the most disturbing to come through the court. The boy's biological mother and father both provided victim impact statements, describing their devastation and the permanent hole left in their lives. Letitia showed little emotion during the sentencing. Even while incarcerated, recordings of her phone calls revealed her discussing plans to escape and her continued denial of responsibility. As of 2025, she remains in a Colorado prison, where she will spend the rest of her life. Our final case involves a woman linked to multiple suspicious incidents. Pam Hupp. In December 2011, a woman was found deceased in her home in Troy, Missouri. Her husband was initially convicted of taking her life, but the case would eventually lead investigators to Pam Hupp, a woman whose name would become connected to multiple suspicious incidents. 2011 was just the beginning of a pattern that would span years. What series of events revealed her involvement? Pam had been born in 1958 and lived what appeared to be a suburban existence. She had worked in insurance and other positions, though there were reports of issues including document falsification that led to job terminations. In 2011, her friend was found with 55 stab wounds in a case initially attributed to the victim's husband. Pam had been the last person known to see her friend alive, and she had been named as a beneficiary on a life insurance policy worth a significant sum. 2 years later, in 2013, Pam's own mother experienced a fatal fall from a balcony. While officially ruled as undetermined, the circumstances raised questions, particularly given that Pam stood to benefit from her mother's estate. Investigators noted suspicious elements, but did not file charges at that time. The most definitive case came in 2016 when Pam shot a man named Louis Gumpenberger in her home. She claimed self-defense, stating he had broken in and attacked her. However, investigators discovered that Pam had approached Louis, who had mental and physical difficulties, and offered him money to participate in what she described as a project. She had then staged a scene with planted items, including a note and a weapon, to make it appear he had intended to harm her. How did authorities finally connect all these incidents? The 2016 case proved to be Pam's undoing, as investigators quickly determined the scene had been fabricated. Evidence suggested she had been attempting to frame the husband who had been convicted in the 2011 case, trying to make it appear he had hired someone to harm Pam in retaliation. Her statements to police after the shooting contained numerous contradictions. Rather than face trial where evidence about all the suspicious incidents would be presented, Pam entered an offered plea in 2019. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release for the 2016 case. The conviction in the 2016 case prompted authorities to re-examine the 2011 incident. The husband who had been convicted was eventually exonerated after spending years in prison for something he did not do. In 2021, prosecutors refiled charges against Pam for that original incident. Her trial for the 2011 case is scheduled for August 2026, and prosecutors are seeking the maximum penalty. Pam is currently held at Chillicothe Correctional Center in Missouri. In 2025, legal proceedings determined that her prison wages would be garnished to provide restitution to the victim's mother. During depositions related to civil cases, she has repeatedly refused to answer questions. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.